channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing a fancy hat that I keep here in Seattle for when I film YouTube videos on this coast. I am still here for one more week following Worldcon, and today I wanted to do a Worldcon / Hugo Awards related video, and that is an if you like this, try that recommendations video for some of this year's nominees. I did 2 of these videos on TikTok with 3 recommendations per video and very little explanation, very just rapid fire recommendations. This is going to be the same list of recommendations plus one more, but I'm going to do the long form thing where I actually talk through my reasoning. Starting with 2 of the best novel nominees, I only read 3 of this year's best novel nominees before the Hugo Awards ceremony. And the first one I'm going to start with is If You Liked A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. And not just like broadly if you like T. Kingfisher, but I think if this specifically is the kind of dark, moody fantasy T. Kingfisher that you like, I'm going to recommend The Briar Book of the Dead by A.G. Slatter. This was another book that came out last year that I read and actually nominated. I put this on my Hugo nominating ballot sort of instead of A Sorceress Comes to Call because I thought it was a similar type of fantasy but slightly more effective. I'm sorry, Sunshine is here with me and she has got all of the zoomies right now. She's being very funny. These books both have a lot of creepy magic family drama, and A.G. Slatter is an author I recommend in general if you like darker Kingfisher. The Briar Book of the Dead is set in the same universe as a bunch of A.G. Slater's previous fiction, including 2 previous novels, All the Murmuring Bones and Path of Thorns. There's also a 4th one that was published this year, The Crimson Road, which I haven't read yet. This book, however, is sort of a stealth sequel to a novella she published years ago under the Angela Slater name of Sorrow and Such. This was from Tor.com. But The Briar Book of the Dead takes place generations later, following descendants of some of the characters from Of Sorrow and Such, and you can absolutely read it as a standalone without reading that novella first. To my mind, I liked A Sorceress Comes to Call, but where it fell a little flat was that it built all of this extremely creepy tension throughout the earlier portions of the book, and then all of that tension kind of dissipated in the end, and it wasn't tonally satisfying for me. Whereas The Briar Book of the Dead, I thought, built towards its conclusion very satisfyingly. But you won't find quite the same whimsical humor in Slater's writing that undercuts kind of everything T. Kingfisher does. And then my other recommendation for best novel was If You Like The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. I would recommend, and this is going to maybe seem a little out of the blue, but Hench by Natalie, Zina, Walschots. I think these are both fundamentally character studies of messy, complicated, professional women in contemporary-ish settings with a speculative twist. Of course, the speculative twist in these 2 books is very, very different. In The Ministry of Time, we're dealing with this top secret government-sanctioned time travel, and both it's sort of like mundane practicalities and then like high-stakes consequences. In Hench, it's set in this superhero universe, and you are following the protagonist's rise through the ranks of basically supervillainy, from being a dispensable temp worker to eventually becoming a trusted assistant of the city's most powerful supervillain. And these are obviously both like highly messy, morally complicated situations for these characters to be in. I will say, I'm not sure I would put this recommendation in reverse. Like, some recommendations really work if you like this, try that, and vice versa. I liked Hench a good deal more when I read it several years ago than I liked The Ministry of Time. So I'm not necessarily sure I would recommend The Ministry of Time to everyone who liked Hench. These are also books that, interestingly, even though they are both speculative, were both published by General Fiction imprints, presumably with a slightly broader readership in mind. I do think Hench might work slightly better for genre SFF readers than The Ministry of Time. But these are both really slow-paced for most of the book, and again, really character-centric. They both do have a little bit of a romantic plot that isn't really a romance. In The Ministry of Time, I think that's a much bigger focus, while in Hench, it's more something that's kind of put off to maybe this will be addressed in the sequel if the sequel ever gets published. Best Novella was actually the category I focused on reading much more this year than Best Novel. I read all of the novellas, and I have 3 recommendations based on books that were nominated in Best Novella. If you liked The Practice, The Horizon, and the Chain by Sofia Samatar, I am going to recommend An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. These are both very hard-hitting dystopian generationship stories. Well, The Practice, The Horizon, and the Chain is sort of a generationship, but not the type that's like going places. It's like hunkered down as a mining station, and then we understand that every once in a while it picks up and goes somewhere else. Whereas An Unkindness of Ghosts is more what we traditionally think about when we talk about generationships. But these are both societies with very strictly delineated social classes, no social mobility, and forced labor for the lower classes. So if you read The Practice, The Horizon, and the Chain, which was very short, and thought this was so incredibly messed up, but in like all of the right angry ways, and you want just like a whole lot more of that, and Unkindness of Ghosts is a full novel. It has been a long time since I've read it though, so my memories of it are a little foggy. Next, in novella, if you like The Brides of High Hill by Nghi, I'm going more broad with this. If you like the whole Singing Hills cycle, The Brides of High Hill being the one that was nominated in Best Novella this year, I'm going to recommend another series of companion books that are all sort of stories about stories in a similar way to the Singing Hills cycle, and that is the Tales of the Chants series by Alexandra Rowland. This consists of 2 novels and 1 novella. The first book is A Conspiracy of Truths, the second book is A Choir of Lies, and the third book is a self-published novella, and that's Over All the Earth. There is one character who is in all 3 of these books, but not necessarily the protagonist of all 3 books, the way that she is the protagonist of all of the Singing Hills novellas. But there is that character overlap. They are more or less standalone capable stories that do follow a character through line. And they follow these characters who are traveling story collectors and storytellers in this universe, the Chants. I will say that the second book in this series, A Choir of Lies, is my favorite Alexandra Rowland book to date. It's the only book of theirs, and I haven't read their newest one yet, the Yield Under Great Persuasion, that's the one I haven't read. But of all of the ones I've read, this is the only book of theirs so far that I've given a full 5 stars to, and it's the one that no one else has read. I can't talk about it with anyone because no one else has read it. It's got like fantasy Dutch tulip mania in it. And then my last novella recommendation is going to be the one that didn't make it into any of the TikTok videos, and that is if you liked The Tusks of Extinction by Ray Naylor, which did in fact win the Best Novella Hugo Award on Saturday, then I would recommend The Only Harmless Great Thing by Brooke Bolander. Now this is a comparison that I am not the first to make. My friend Rhea of the book Finch made this comparison on one of our Stitch and Bitch live shows before I read this book. So I went into The Tusks of Extinction with that comparison in mind, given that I had loved and given 5 stars to The Only Harmless Great Thing back in the day. And it didn't disappoint. I thought that comparison was apt. The Only Harmless Great Thing is also a very, very short book. It's actually a novelette by word count, I think. And it's also like a kind of non-linear, angry elephant/mammoth book. about the ways that humans abuse these very intelligent animals. It's alternate history instead of being science fiction set in the future. I think there is also a near future plotline in The Only Harmless Great Thing as well, though. It's focused around the alternate history of a real historical elephant. So even though the trappings are very different, some of the elephant stuff at the core of it feels like it's the same. I think The Only Harmless Great Thing had somewhat denser writing than the Tusks of Extinction, but I think Naylor is also a stylish prose writer in his own way. Anyways, this book got a lot of buzz back when it was released, but I haven't seen people talk about it in a really long time. Next, I have a recommendation for if you liked Sheine Lende by Darcie Littlebadger, which won the Lodestar Award for Young Adult Book this year. I was so happy about that win. It was what I voted for. I loved this book. The book I am going to recommend is actually not YA. It is a graphic novel. It's Shubeik Lubeik by Deena Mohamed, which was nominated for Best Graphic Story last year but did not win, which I was a little sad about. But despite being like different genres, formats, age groups, what these books have in common is that they are both set in alternate versions of our world with a little bit of magic. Darcie Littlebadger's alternate US history here involves some magic from folklore. It's very kind of typical urban fantasy. There's, you know, some fae stuff, there's some vampire stuff that you get in her first book, Elatsoe. This is a prequel to Elatsoe. I think you can read them in either order. But the characters in these books, being indigenous, have powers that are related to their own indigenous heritage and mythology. But this book is still so very focused on sort of everyday life sort of things, even with all of those magical elements. And similarly, Shubeik Lubeik is set in a world where wishes can be bottled and sold as a commodity, and it takes a look at how that would impact the real world. Specifically, this is set in contemporary Cairo with all of the real world inequalities that we have. This book follows not one protagonist, but several over multiple story arcs. And like Sheine Lende, I think it is just so focused on the personal tragedies and triumphs of normal people within a setting that has some magic in it. And then I think my final recommendation may come across a little snarky because these were both 3-star books for me, but I promise I do not mean it that way. This is a genuine, if you like this, try that. And I think this is one that maybe goes both ways. Hannah Kaner was up for the Astounding Award for Best New Writer this year. I only managed to read the first book in her trilogy, Godkiller. I did write a full review of this, and I ended up writing that review because I got to the end and I really couldn't tell whether I had felt that this was a 3-star book or a 4-star book, and I sat down and I wrote that review, and by the end of the review I knew that I couldn't justify giving it more than 3 stars. Even though I did enjoy this book, and I do think I will read the second one at some point. My recommendation is that if you liked Godkiller by Hannah Kaner, I'm going to recommend The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This was a book I liked a little less maybe, and probably won't be continuing with the series, but these are both kind of borderline cases for me. They are both formulaic fantasy series starters that superficially have very different trappings. Godkiller has a more European fantasy aesthetic to it, whereas The Stardust Thief is very Middle Eastern. But despite that, I do think they are kind of following the same formula, and I want to emphasize that I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with formulaic fantasy fiction. It's just not mostly what I'm seeking out right now. Also, these are both debuts by authors who seem to be incredibly talented and probably have long careers ahead of them. But some of the parallels that these have in common, these both focus on a sort of group of characters that sort of fit into certain archetypes. They end up going on a quest adventure together as a group after a whole lot of setup, because you need a whole lot of setup for these sort of things to put all of these people into the right places together. But like once they're on this adventure, they're in both books going to this sort of fallen or lost magical city of some sort. By the time they get there, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, very vague, there's some sort of twist that has to do with the politics back in the capital that will presumably affect the storyline going forward. Both of these groups of people have like someone who lost their family very dramatically when they were young. Both of them have a magical immortal character of some sort in them. In Godkiller, that character is a god, and in The Stardust Thief, that's a djinn. And in both of these worlds, these powerful magical beings have been hunted by the humans and are in danger of being killed by the humans. Both of these groups have someone in them who might hunt or kill one of these powerful magical creatures. And all of these parallels are not because these books are stealing from each other. Obviously, they were published around the same time. It's because they are both following the same fantasy formula. And if you are into that formula, I think you might like both of these books. Anyhow, that is all my recommendations for today. I hope you're having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.